Hi, here is a quick video on different ways to darken and lighten areas of a picture. I'm going to start with the really simplest way, and that is to go into Camera Raw, which is Filter, Camera Raw. Now, because this picture is already processed, it's Camera Raw applying, it's not going back to the raw file. It's possible to do that, but that's a more complicated version. But this is using the Camera Raw processing on a picture that's already processed. So up here is a new, only recently, a new set of masks, which are really intuitive and really helpful. So if you click up here on masks, you can choose to select the sky, and it will do, obviously there's no sky here, but if in a landscape it will pick the sky out most of the time. It's very very clever. So we're going to start with the radial blur, because people often want to do a kind of gradient around the edges, but it always, if you use that in Photoshop, it often looks very artificial and fake. So with the radial gradient, we're going to click on that, and we're just going to pull it. So it's going to select the face, but it's going to not go over the hands. Now you can see it's selected the face. What we're going to do is we're going to press this little button here, which inverts it from the face to the outer area, and we can obviously increase or decrease the feathering. We want the feathering to be quite harsh. So now if we go down to exposure and take it all the way down, you can see where it's working. So we can decide exactly how subtle we want this gradient to be. For me, I would actually lower the highlights as well, because I want it to be a bit flatter. So not just darker, but a bit flatter, and the highlights will flatten out. I don't use the highlight very often, but I do use it when I'm doing things like this. And I sometimes take down the blacks if necessary as well, because if I'm doing dark, I don't want any picture, any part of my picture to go absolute black, mainly for printing purposes. So you can control at every point just how much detail is in your picture, and if you compress too much your shadows, you will lose information in your prints. It doesn't make so much difference on the web, but it does make a big difference to prints. Okay, so that's one way. If we press OK, now we can think, okay, we've overdone this. So if we go up to Edit, Fade, you can then fade what you've just done with Camera Raw to nothing, or in whatever percentage that you want. So you can be even more subtle. I mean, that's probably where I would be. So that's, I will do one more for you. So if we went another layer, and again, filter, Camera Raw filter, and go up here again. Now we can use brush. Now with brush, we can set our flow. Now the flow is how much ink, when you're painting, is, and in this case we're going to paint red, which will then turn into a selection. If it's 100%, it's going to be really strong. If we come down lower, you can see it's much subtler. So I will go with a low flow, and I will build up slower which areas that I want to select. That way we've got a much smoother, softer, more random selection. So when we go darker here, obviously we're going dark over another dark. You can see that it's actually more subtle. That's a good way, particularly if you've got little areas like you wanted to darken these fingernails a bit more. So that's, and press enter. So that's the Camera Raw method, which is really powerful. The way that I do burn and dodge, which is what we're talking about, dodging, lightening, burning, darkening, from the old darkroom techniques, I would do it in a different way. So I'll show you the way that way works fine if you don't want to do it this way, but I will show you this way because it is it's a better way. for more subtle detail. So we're going to go back to the original image. We saturated it because I will talk to you about the color profile on Facebook. You always want to convert it to sRGB. It didn't have a color profile, so the computer gives it one, which means the colors come out too saturated. So it's a good idea to put an sRGB profile when you do anything on the internet, because then it will be more consistently colored. The color will be more consistent. Okay, so burn and dodge. So burn and dodge, we make a new curves adjustment layer, and we make one lighter. So everything's lighter. And then we call this dodge. Then we make another curves adjustment. And call this burn. I don't know why I didn't press the B, but I didn't. Now we're going to do a black and white layer, which is just a desaturated layer. There's multiple ways to do it, but a nice simple way is just to do a flat grey colour, or anything up to light or dark, and just apply as colour. It's not good for doing black and white photographs, but it's really good for showing us the tonality of the picture for when we're doing burn and dodge. So now we've got the burn and dodge on, so we're going to do invert it so it's black, invert it so it's black, so it's now not affected. So we've now got the original picture but in grey. I personally would always put these in a folder. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start with burn and select the brush, and depending on, we could do large areas. I'm going to start with a large area. I have the flow set to 1%, and sometimes I have the opacity set to 50%, so it's really applying it really, really subtly. So I'm going to just start painting on the whole area here that we're going to take down. And we can zoom in. Now make the brush smaller, and we can start to take out those bright fingernails which are distracting. So we're just painting, and you really, because we're so subtle, you'll find that you can just gradually add it. You see where the brighter edges are. Now it doesn't look like you've done very much, which is why burning and dodging is very easy to overdo. A lot of skin retouching is done using this method. So if I turn off the black and white, zoom out, and then turn that dodge layer, look at the effect. Now sometimes you can have a saturation problem. You can see here this is saturated. So there's multiple ways to fix this. One of the ways is to press Command and click on that layer. Now we've got a selection, which is that layer, and we can create a new hue and saturation layer using just those bits, and then we can then take that saturation down to what we feel is acceptable. This is the classic burn and dodge. I use a different method, but it is a little bit more complicated. I will do a video on it, but it involves a lot more work beforehand. So I create it in an action, so it all prepares my area for doing burn and dodge. I'll quickly show you a closer. Well, first of all, I'll make the jacket look a bit more interesting using burn and dodge. So we'll just go to the burn layer, and then we're going to paint along the darker areas. So we'll just paint the areas around that are already dark, and then we'll go dodge layer, and now we're going to paint the bits that are already light. and your brain starts to raise and lighten areas that actually magnify the detail. And the reason I put it in a folder is at any time you can turn it on and off, and you can see what it's done to that arm. It's made it look more textured, and you can work, and this is how we work on the face as well. If we want, if there's detail on the face, we'd often do this in multiple dodge. So you'd have like I've got like a large areas, then you've got more subtle areas. But here, I'll just show you. So if we go into burn layer, we can go in here. If we want to soften the amount of detail here, we can do that, or we can go in and we can lighten areas by subtly just painting. This is actually how most fashion images are retouched, is by doing the back. It's very slow, but you have absolute control over just how much contrast you have in the skin, because obviously you may want to apply more or less to it. But hopefully that will give you some idea. I think probably I would start doing the first method using Camera Raw, and then try using this later on, because this is a really powerful technique for really honing your images and bringing the attention of the viewer to the areas that you want. It is overused for skin retouching, but that doesn't mean we've got to overuse it. It's just a tool, depending on how you use it. Hopefully that was helpful. If it isn't, let me know. If there's any more detail in any areas, just give us a shout and I'll provide that. Take care.